All right. So let me get this up and running. And bingo numero uno, bingo dos. Gentlemen, can I hear you? Can I get a check, 1, 2?
1, 2.
1, 2.
All right. Yep. We good. Man, this has been, I'm really looking forward to this because I feel like there's, we had a previous episode that was offline and now we're online and about to sort of like summarize and expand on the conversations that we had in person. Anyhow, I'll let you gentlemen introduce yourselves. I'll start with Yoav.
Hi, I'm Yoav. I've been working on web performance for a long while.
Well, first of all, where do you work, sir?
So I work at Shopify, working as a web platform engineer, working on bringing Shopify to the cutting edge of the web platform and bringing the web platform to where Shopify needs it to be. That's the pitch.
All right.
Co-chairing the web performance working group, Chromium WebKit contributor, and a bunch of other things, I guess.
Okay. All right. I mean, I believe, and I was thinking about it earlier, I think I came across you and your work during the responsive images community group, which I've seen you wear the t-shirt from time to time.
Yeah, that was my gateway drug into the fascinating world of browsers and standards.
Okay. Well, we'll get into that in a hot minute then. But I do want to thank you and welcome for joining us.
Thank you.
By all means, je t'en prie.
My name is Mateusz, Matthew, Matt. You can, it's a Polish name, so it's hard to pronounce. So I'm used to that. My name is Mateusz. I also work at Shopify. That's how I know Yoav, pretty much. And I'm maybe like not so much like focused entirely on the platform itself because I primarily work with merchants directly on specific stores. The idea is that we are this like first line of web performance folks that work in the trenches. We then gather that experience, and this is where I take all of this baggage to Yoav and I say, hey, let's do something about this so I don't have to fix the same thing over and over and over again. So super excited to be here. I've been doing that for a few years now, like web performance specifically, I don't know, maybe 5. But I've been in e-commerce almost my entire career. So I feel like I'm in a good place right now.
E-commerce is certainly grown to be one of the more important aspects of the web, because it's pretty much at this point. I think the web is like an essential service, and having e-commerce operating properly, I think has been proving to be the thing to certainly spend some time on and make sure that is working as smoothly as possible. But you touched on it real quickly, and this is a question that I like to ask all my guests. What was their first memory, or when they realized they were going to work in performance? And I'll start with you, Mateusz.
Okay. I think this was back in my Magento days. For those who are not familiar, Magento is also like an e-commerce platform. It's, I think, the biggest like open source e-commerce platform out there. I still hope it is open source because I know there has been some like back and forth going on. But so I worked in an agency. I've been there actually for 5 years, I think, and we are mainly doing Magento projects. And at some point, I think we got one client that started complaining about performance, and we had really competent backend folks they did a great job in like spinning up this like huge beast, but like the front end itself wasn't that great. It's built on a technology that not a lot of people work with these days, like Knockout.js, for example. And it doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just that like all of the tools and everything, like you had to adapt them. You had to figure out how it all works. And this is where I started digging deeper. Okay, how can we speed up this whole system? This was also back in the days where Google Lighthouse was the source of truth of your performance. Everyone was, showing off their 100 perfect scores and stuff. And I think this is where it really started. And I think it was a really, I think it's hard to ask for a better start, because like, as you said, like with e-commerce, it's also the fact that like the work that we do is directly tied with money as well. Like you make the performance better, you can see like the value right away, because like people are more likely to buy something, less likely to abandon and stuff. So it was a really rewarding process and a really good way to start now that I look back on it, I think.
That was interesting. So it took one client to sort of, kind of complain about the performance, and then you started to spend some time digging in, as you said.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the main thing that like got me like that, I immediately got hooked in was that like in the performance work, like I think over the years we like web performance people made this whole thing, like we build a bunch of metrics, all of those numbers that tell you how good of the job you did. And I am definitely like a numbers guy. I really like seeing the impact of my work as quickly as possible. So the fact that I was able to like speed this thing up, and I had a bunch of metrics that confirmed that I did a good job, was super gratifying. So and that's how it started, and we started applying the same thing to every other project. I started advocating internally that we put more focus on that and stuff, and it's been going since then, I think.
No, it's great. I think that's a fantastic story. And again, I ask because I feel everyone's got a particular story, and I'll quickly mention Jakob's from last week. He talked about just, literally having the low power devices and noticing that everyone else had like a better experience, and he just didn't understand why for a while, so that prompted him. And as well, he actually mentioned, and I know Yoav will remember this, and Mateusz, you might as well, that very famous and well-traveled story by Chris Zacharias when he was at YouTube, the Project Feather, when he blogged about the experience that he had tackling the landing page performance of youtube.com, and making some discoveries, and sharing it in a blog post. And Jakob mentioned that specifically as being, again, part of his lasting memories of this is, reading that really drove him into performance. Now, I know we would need the next hour to cover Yoav's entry point into performance, but Yoav, if you want to share with us your earliest memories of how you got in.
Let's time bound it, like put a timer. But essentially, so yes, like I said, I've been doing this web performance thing for a while, actually, since the previous millennia. As embarrassing as that is. So essentially, my like first job as like starting my adult life, I knew some, I could get around with computers, and basically even like before I went to higher education. I got a job working for a startup that accelerated websites going through, like, focused on satellite networks. So let's speed up satellite networks when that was, the previous generation of satellite networks that were, very high latency, very, not a good experience. Then that startup pivoted to, cellular networks when those became a thing. And essentially, I spent a few years making websites work over GPRS, which is 11 kilobit per second. And then, the networks evolve over time. I, moved countries, went to school, then went back, but stayed involved in web performance throughout this entire time. And then at some point, browsers were no longer a black box, or at least a lot of them. So that enabled me, because for most of, for the start of this, it was all IE and a black box, and whatever the browser did, you had to live with that. And then with Firefox, and then Android, like the Android browser, WebKit, and eventually Chrome, that was no longer the case. So at some point, I got more and more involved in open source and responsive images community group. And essentially at some point, I had opinions about image delivery on the web. I wrote them in a blog post and then waited for someone else to do something about that. And no one did, surprisingly. So when the responsive images community group were looking for someone that knows C++ to hack around browsers, I'm like, I can do that. A year and a half and a lot of internet fights later, Picture and SourceAt were a thing in Chromium and then WebKit. And after that, I essentially did only open source for a while, which was very fun and very stressful. And then got a job at Akamai working on both the browser and the server-side features, essentially building performance on both ends and implementing features on the browser and on the server side to use them. So preload, pre-connect, client hints, and a few others, I guess. And then after that, went to work for Google for a few years. And now for the last 2 years, I've been at Shopify, essentially back to driving browsers from the outside, not as a browser vendor, but as an industry participant, which I think is super important for maintaining the web as an open platform, as a platform driven by the user's needs, by the developer's needs, and not just by browser vendor needs. So I think that's super important. I also think, like you mentioned, e-commerce. I think that it's extremely important for more e-commerce, for e-commerce folks to be involved in the direction of the web platform, because it's one of the pillars in terms of one of the financial pillars of the web. But there aren't a lot of people that are working on browsers that know this area well. So I'm trying to do what I can on that front.
Awesome. All right, so that was it, folks. We're going to wrap up. I just want to play. Yes, e-commerce is very important. It is a financial pillar, outside of ads, apparently. But I will say this. Firstly, you mentioned that when Android came around, Android celebrated a 17th year anniversary this week. Which I was like, wow, Android's been around that long, huh? Which we tend to sort of forget, but it's interesting to sort of like to see the path that they've taken over the years, and they've been obviously very instrumental in the performance work. Because of the handsets and the devices out there that are operating on Android, and unfortunately also operating at a lower spec. So these things sort of tend to come back. But yes, we also obviously realized over the last several years now, how important the browser is in that equation, from just staying on top of new specs and whatnot, making sure that you could use them. And this is a conversation I'm sure we're going to have today at some point, and which is why I think today's stream is going to be like so interesting, because there's so many angles to the work that you guys are doing. And we might as well start to dip into that, because for those who may not know, in May of this year, I believe it was late May, both Mateusz and Yoav were in Toronto, and I was pleased to have them as guests for a bit of a Shopify takeover, because they had this secret event happening in Toronto that I didn't know about, obviously. And so they were my guests to sort of like talk about what they were working on. And at the time, Mateusz came through and talked about spec rules and what they were doing. And it had been about 400 days since they had been experimenting in May. And today, it would be just over 500. So, Mateusz, I'll hand over my keys and I'll let you sort of like walk us through what has been happening in the last little while.
Cool. Do you want me to start from the very beginning, or?
I mean, it's up to you. You're in control, as I mentioned.
Yeah. So I wanted to like give people maybe a little bit of a background to the whole story, because so Shopify is an e-commerce platform, but the thing with like Shopify stores is that they are like 99% of a store that you see, like it can be customized from the code point of view. There's very little input that we do into each of the stores. So like this also impacts the control that we have and the interventions that we can do. And that's important from the performance perspective, because it limits the things that you control. We basically operate in this area of things that we can influence, usually, especially on the front end. And so we are always, because of that, we are always on the lookout for things that we can apply to the entire platform, but don't really require us to change anything on every single store, modify the code, inject additional things. And because like when you start meddling with what people wrote, things start to break, basically. Mm-hmm. So you want to limit that to the very minimum. And I think that's where Barry Pollard's blog post about speculation rules came in 1.5 years ago, I think, where he talked about this new thing that lets you instruct the browser that it should. So the whole idea about speculation rules is that like you can tell the browser that it should start preloading future URLs that the user might navigate to, so that when they actually do, these things will be served from the cache, and that will happen faster. And this is where I started experimenting with the technology, trying to implement that on the whole like platform level. And I must say I actually got pretty far, but then we hit multiple roadblocks that I talked about in my talk. We can probably chat about them later in this call. and we had to like pause the whole project. And it's as much as like this whole like 500 days thing is a little bit clickbaity. Like we actually had to spend some of that time just waiting for browsers to catch up with bug fixes and stuff. Fortunately, like a few months ago, Yoav picked up a lot of that work. We worked together, and we were still, I think, in the rollout phase during the presentation, when I was doing the presentation. But like now, speculation rules are actually implemented across the whole Shopify platform, and hence the blog post that I wrote about that finally states some numbers that we got out of the like A/B testing that we did, and talks a little bit about the challenges of the whole thing. So that's a general overview of the whole timeline, I guess. So we can dig deeper whenever you want to go from here, I guess.
Yeah, certainly. And again, I certainly want it to be so that people understand where you came from, where you're at right now, and where you plan to go. Now, you had that conversation obviously back in Toronto in May, but you're certainly at a different point than that May conversation, and so that's kind of like it was good to bring people up to speed. And I certainly do want to talk about what is the situation now, what you've been seeing in from the platform, as after shipping. And obviously, Yoav, I certainly do want to hear from your perspective in terms of having worked with Mateusz on this, and what was required from you to make this possible.
Yeah, Yoav, would you like to give an overview of everything, I guess, that changed since like the initial version, because we had some struggles.
Yeah, so I guess the initial version, I get like you had that initial experiment that then ran into, I think it was a browser bug when links are prefetched but then removed using JavaScript.
Yes.
Because merchants do weird things with JavaScript, and that was not something that was expected on the browser side. So I think it just froze the whole tab or something awful like that. So that I think was the issue that essentially put the project on pause. And then Mateusz, I don't know how much time later, the bug was fixed. We were like, okay, so let's do this. And speculation rules are simple. It's just, there's a config. Mateusz already had the config figured out. We'll just, add that to the HTML and we're done. And as it turns out, thing is slightly more complicated than that. So initially that config was essentially exclusion rules. So we don't want to prefetch that link and that link that we know that are problematic because they're not necessarily idempotent, and prefetching them can cause weird side effects, but everything else is fine. And that turned out to be a relatively naive approach to this, because merchants do weird things with JavaScript, and there were, at least in some, we started rolling that out, and then that hit issues, and we rolled it back because some merchants had issues with that. But one more thing we discovered with that is that from a caching perspective, integrating the rules directly into the HTML meant that we can't really roll them back. Like if we find issues with the rules or find issues with the browser related to the rules, we can't switch them out quickly because they're in the HTML. It's part of the HTML cache. We need to purge our HTML cache in order to do that, and that is a costly and a lengthy and costly process that we didn't want to go through twice, I guess. We went through that once. It was not fun.
So hold that thought for a second. Speaking of twice, you've mentioned this twice actually, that merchants do weird things with JavaScript. If you, what's an example? What's a memory that you had in terms of, okay, we're having issues with merchants and we're seeing this. Like, what was a weird thing?
I think the pattern that broke the browser and made us like stop the whole thing and wait for the like bug fix in the browser was that like you had a standard search, and when you would start typing, you get some like autocomplete links that like you search for a shirt and you get like a bunch of like autocomplete, links. And the UI was coded in such a way that like when you clicked one of those links, I think this was some kind of like a Preact component or something like that, that on every click outside of the input, it closed the autocomplete. And closing meant that it was removed from the DOM. And we hit this like weird scenario where we were trying to prefetch a link based on the element that no longer existed, and it froze the whole tab. So at that point, we're like, okay, this is not something that we can address because it can happen anywhere for any link. And we basically had to go back to the Chromium team and say, guys, like we can't really like do anything. We need to wait for you to roll this out. And like at this point, I would like to really say that like we wouldn't be able, like as much as long as it took us, we wouldn't be able to move like this quickly, because we actually, like in terms of the browsers, their versions, their adoption, everything like moved super quickly, and we wouldn't be able to do it if not for an immense help that we got from the Chromium team. Because like we weren't really, I don't know if you could call us like early adopters, but like certainly at this like scale we were, and they were really like super helpful. Like we were trying to do our best in explaining bugs, submitting everything, but like in terms of fixing this and having all of the context and sharing it, like they were super helpful and a valuable thing to have along the way.
Yeah. Also for feature requests like clear site data and other things that
Yep. I think another example, which is not like a weird thing that you would do, but like we have like cart links or like checkout links that there is a JavaScript logic that like hijacks the click and just shows you the sidebar instead of taking you to the page and stuff, which then leads to like weird behavior and another browser bugs because like the cache is shared between different things. So we hit all of those weird scenarios, which is like, I don't believe, if not for all of the different stores and permutations of different approaches and the amount of users that we had, like I don't think we would ever be able to find all of those cases otherwise. Like if I were like implementing this feature, like I wouldn't expect, like I wouldn't even test that, right? Like it's an unknown. So yeah, like that's why we're like super glad that like every time we hit this kind of scenario, like we always had the support from the Chromium team and the bug fixes were rolling out really quickly.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, so I really wanted to ask because again, when you mentioned merchants doing weird things, I'm like, what weird things are those? And it came up again. I'm like, oh, and I could imagine having such a massive platform that a possible merchant solution could be shared at scale, and then suddenly you have like the issue everywhere.
Yeah, and to be clear, like weird is not
a technical term.
Not a judgmental statement. It's just something that you wouldn't expect to happen and wasn't part of the regular testing flows. But life has complexity, and merchants have complex solutions for that complexity.
Yeah, and again, that's the beauty of the work that you guys do in terms of like the investigation and making sure that things are smooth. Okay, so I wanted to interrupt there because it was interesting that you had mentioned it twice. So I wanted to get an idea of what weird things you two gentlemen were seeing. So I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, so we rolled this like simplistic version of the rules, and then rolled it back and changed them to ones that are more, an allow list rather than a block list. So basically, here are the links that we know are safe, instead of a list of links like that we know are not safe, because merchants also have links of their own that can be unsafe that we couldn't foresee. So and then moved to use the header, so like the speculation rules header, rather than inlining the speculation rules adjacent into the HTML. Changed a lot of the server-side architecture in order to support that, and support easy purging of those rules if they turn out to be wrong, which incidentally the other day we ended up using that, because apparently web views don't support pre-render, like in terms of, I don't know if it's a browser bug or just a spec bug in a way, but if web views hit pre-render, which they don't support, they drop the whole speculation rules entirely, instead of falling back to prefetch, for example. So that is not something.
And that was on Monday. So it's like it shows you that it's really like a living organism, and the whole process. Like we uncover another like gap in our data. Like, okay, we would expect the performance to get better in here, but it doesn't. Or like we would expect a lot of like same site navigations to actually like benefit from the solution, and they don't. And we have to dig into the data and start testing again. And we filed another bug like yesterday, which is like more, I don't know if it's a bug or maybe more like a feature request, improvement request. So yeah, it shows like how I guess how complex the whole thing is. Also, like, I think the whole complexity comes from the fact that you're trying to, I don't know if you remember, but like the whole like prefetching feature navigation started, I think, as an instant page script. I don't know if like some people may remember that, but there was this script that started like preloading things when you started hovering on links, or like clicking, but like putting your finger down and not waiting before you release when the click happens. And we also have a lot of like stores using that on our platform as well. We had to make sure it works. This works together well with speculation rules. So like, there are a lot of things we had to cover, and everything has to work nicely together. That we always have to monitor the data, and we keep uncovering all of the different cases. So that's the story is definitely not over, I think, in this case as well.
And I have to say that this was possible. Like, this is a great example, and this is all like Mateusz's like data genius. But this was possible because we had two different experiments running different versions of speculation rules, one with pre-render and one without. And we were essentially seeing discrepancies. Mateusz was seeing discrepancies in the data, and then went digging in and found out this bug. So essentially, you need to experiment, and you need to gather the data and be able to tell which is which, and this is where things like speculation tags, which was a relatively late addition to speculation rules, where we get a tag with the prefetch saying this is the source of this prefetch. This is why the browser is prefetching this particular navigation, and this enables us to do that kind of an analysis, where we can distinguish between experiment A, experiment B, and the merchant's own speculation rules or legacy prefetches.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're A/B testing with two versions of spec rules.
Yeah. And like it's even more complex than that. Like when you start implementing those things, and because like we correct RAM data, right? So if you implement something like that, you want to see the impact of your work. You want to be able to measure that. But like we have our own speculation rules. Merchants can add their own speculation rules. You have a lot of stores that are using those like JavaScript-based solutions. Like they will prefetch using the link rel prefetch different pages based on like even custom logic. And so like you look at this data, like we sit down together with Yoav and like, okay, like how do we tell which is which? Like what kind of mechanism are we dealing with? Like we have, millions of events pouring in. Like how do we distinguish between them? And it also speaks to the work that the Chromium team were doing. Like they had almost like they had the answers before we even asked the questions. Like it was like, okay, how do we distinguish that? And then we got a ping that like, oh, we are rolling out those speculation rules tags that will allow you to add a specific ID to your speculation rules. So okay, so now we are able to distinguish, okay, this is something that's coming from us. This is something that like the merchant added on top, and this is like a JavaScript-based solution that is totally like unrelated, but is still doing a similar thing. So So that's how we had to work, and the fact that like there were solutions to address that, like shows how good of a design of this feature it was. Like someone really thought about, okay, like what would people need to know once they start using this.
Wow. Here's a quick question or possible comment, but more of a question. And this goes back to a quick conversation that Mateusz and I had, because when you had shared the blog post, and I was like, "Hey, do you want to come on and talk about this?" As almost kind of like a follow-up to your talk in Toronto, you had mentioned making sure that Yoav was available as well, so he could kind of share his input, which I'm always happy to have Yoav on. But the more important part and question I have for potentially both of you, but Mateusz in particular, would a company that works at Shopify scale, and we all established at the start of the show that e-commerce is very important, period. So would a company at the scale of Shopify benefit from having their own Yoav, meaning someone who has had experience working at the browser level, understands where to sort of tackle a browser bug, and also have that sort of like membership within the community at, say, whether it be a W3C or community group, and speak to browsers and represent interests, if you understand what I'm saying. Yeah,
definitely, like 100%. Like, to be clear, like this work here, it's a small, really small part of all of the different topics that Yoav is involved in when it comes to Shopify. So there are tens of standards that you need as such a big platform. Like this is performance, but like if you're an e-commerce platform, we are talking privacy, payments, I don't know, all of the different stuff that I don't even know about, right? So like 100%. And it's not only in terms of the performance work, it's about everything, all of the input that you can have in the web platform itself. I'm sure Yoav can speak more about like all of the stuff that he's doing, but like for me it was super helpful. And like I'm fairly new to this whole scene and industry, so it's, you know, it's always hard to figure out, okay, who should I speak with when I have this kind of an issue? What is the process for filing a bug? Like, you know, who is usually taking care of that? So like, you know, having such a person, no matter which team you're working on, you can be building some UIs in the admin panel, you can be creating a new theme, you can be doing anything else. Having a person that like lives and breathes this whole web platform, I think from my perspective, it definitely like recommend. So yeah. Yoav, would you recommend as well?
This is a weird question, but basically, so I have to say that for speculation rules in Chromium browsers, I did very little browser engineering and more like Shopify side engineering, and I let the very capable Chrome team lead the work. Maybe I filed a bug or two, and maybe I pinged people because I know them. But other than that, I mostly did like Shopify side engineering work. Whereas like but yes, generally, I think it is helpful to have a browser engineer on a web facing team, because it like essentially enables you to figure out bugs, open a browser build, and debug things from the inside rather than from the outside, and that often gives you a ton of insights. And the part that I think is most beneficial is just basically enable you to, like, as a large platform, push the stuff that you need to in order to operate into the browsers, into web platforms. So things like integrity policy related to PCI compliance, which if you don't know what that is, you're probably better off. But there was a lot of things related to integrity and validating that the scripts that you're running on your sites are the scripts that you think you're running on your sites. And that is important, and things that like it wasn't possible before, and it is possible now because we made it happen in Chromium and in WebKit, and I believe Firefox are following. Things like dynamic import maps, or multiple import maps, I guess that's the name we landed on. But essentially, being able to have more than a single import map in a page enables you to ship import maps at scale in ways that we relied on now for our flagship theme Horizon, in ways that we couldn't have done that like before. So I think it's very important to be able to set your own destiny rather than consider browsers as something given to us by the browser gods. And having a browser engineer on the team that is actively working on browsers is the way to do that. And going back to speculation rules, one of the things, so like we shipped speculation rules for Chromium browsers. We saw great results. I don't know if Mateusz wants to present the graphs, but we saw great results across all percentiles. Basically, all the loading metrics dropped by 130 to 180 milliseconds, I think, and maybe with the recent WebView thing, it's even more than that. So this is great. This covers like half the population. What about the other half? What about Safari? So I've been working for the last couple of months on essentially building a subset of speculation rules without pre-render, without cross-origin navigations, but a small initial subset that I think is shippable. I have a working PR. It's being reviewed. It's being discussed, and I hope it can make it. It can land behind a flag. There's also it will take a while before it ships, most probably. But if you want to see a change in the world, you have to be that change. So.
Well. So you're telling us we should star that issue? Is that it?
Sure.
As we keep moving, Mateusz, did you want to share that the graphs or something that you have shared, or whoever has it? I don't know who's ready to share the screen. As we wait for that, shout out to Barry, shout out to Chris. Thank you for joining. And I'm going to add God's notes to the stage.
Yeah. So this is from a blog post that I wrote on our performance.shopify.com blog, and I think I showed similar graphs during my talk. There were those graphs were from a before and after test, and this is coming from an A/B test. So this shows that there is a clear difference across all of the loading metrics. So we have time to first byte, we have first content viewpoint, we have largest content viewpoint, and we have all of the percentiles. There's your P75 that everyone loves and wants the P75 to be good, right? So we not only see it across all loading metrics, but across all percentiles as well. And the overall, we're seeing, as Yoav said, 130 milliseconds on desktop and 180 milliseconds on mobile. And I think it's worth noting that our current configuration, it works with, because speculation rules, they can have different eagerness levels. Mm-hmm. The more eager you are, the more aggressive basically that the browser will be in preloading specific, either prefetching or pre-rendering. You can define what it should be. So this is with the most conservative, that's a keyword, conservative approach, where the browser will start prefetching a page when you put your finger down. So this is the pointer down event. Normally, the navigation happens on click, so you need to put your finger down and then lift it up. We don't wait for the second event, and that's an interesting insight, is that it seems like clicking on your mouse is faster than tapping on mobile. Hence 130 milliseconds improvement on desktop, because that's basically, it seems like that's how long it takes for people to click, and 180 on mobile, because that's how long it takes for people to tap. And this is confirmed. We are super happy about it may not sound like a lot, but if you apply it at that scale and pretty much to all same site navigations, where we are able to apply those speculation rules, then it's actually a huge benefit for us. So yeah, definitely.
And
nice
180 milliseconds of improvements on mobile is significant.
Yeah, that's if you need to put that into perspective, right? It's and also it's something that our merchants benefit from without doing anything. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best part of it. Suddenly all of the Shopify stores got a little bit faster. Of course, this only applies to this happy path where the speculation rules can be applied. So this has to be a same site navigation. They already exclude all of the first visits, right? For now, it has to be a Chromium browser as well. But it's still a big chunk of all of the page views that we are speeding up, and we're hoping that like with Yoav's work and things landing in iOS and Safari, like in Safari on iOS and Mac and everywhere else, like we'll be able to address even bigger share of users that way.
Did you want to add something, Yoav? I just saw you shaking your head. I wasn't too sure.
Just that Interop 2026 has wrapped up yesterday, or at least like the submissions wrapped up yesterday. Mateusz, I think, submitted, or maybe someone else submitted.
I think, someone else was faster.
Yeah. So if speculation rules were part of Interop, that would be cool.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And
so,
for those
that is where I would, point people to star things. But
and for those listening, watching, who are not familiar with Interop, if you want to kind of share what that is specifically.
Oh, it's a cross-browser vendor program that essentially provides browser vendors with focus areas on places where developers are hitting pain points of differences in support between different browsers, and browsers invest resources in improving their, essentially passing more tests in this particular area, and then they're being scored based on the number of tests that they're now passing or the number of tests that it improved. I don't remember the details, but essentially it creates incentives for browser vendors to improve the features that are part of that Interop program and make sure that they work seamlessly across browsers from a developer perspective.
Absolutely. And folks, I'll Interop's been happening for a few years now, but what I'll do in the show notes, I'll definitely have links to that so you can read exactly what it is that's been going on. Now, before we sort of like taper and wrap up, I'm going to share a little screen here. Let me see. This may look familiar, Mateusz.
Yeah.
This is, one of your closing slides from May of this year at your presentation. So I thought we could just go through it and see where we're at. So
great me. Great my work.
Awesome. No, but more like, just as a wrap up, and maybe some of these aren't complete yet. So I think it's good to kind of like, get a sense of where you are along the way. So, obviously, the first line was that you've released the spec rules to 100% of the stores. Congratulations again. That was, I think, a fantastic. And I saw the announcements online from various people. And now you also talked about more aggressive eagerness. Where are you at there?
Yeah. So the thing here that I'm mentioning, the clear site data, just to give a little bit of context, one of the things that, like, when you're going more aggressive and you start the browser to prefetch things or pre-render things earlier, one of the issues you're dealing with is that, like, you may then be showing a stale content. Imagine someone browsing a collection page. They hover around on different products. Those products get prefetched, but then someone on that collection page adds a product to the cart. And then they navigate to that product page. Suddenly, when they go to that product page, the number of products that they see in their cart is not correct because it's like a stale thing. It's just one of the examples. You can account for that, of course, with some additional JavaScript that refreshes all of that stuff. But like, we needed some more, native way of saying, hey, like, we know that something changed the state for the user. You need to invalidate all of the prefetches, all of the pre-renders now. And this is what this header allows you to do. when you're returning a response to some like API call, mainly in the API call, and in our case, this is all of the API endpoints that modify the cart. We return this clear-site data header that tells the browser, like, if you already prefetched something or pre-rendered something, please discard that, and you can prefetch it again if the action happens from the user, but like you can't reuse the old content. And this was one of the building blocks for us going more aggressive. And we shipped that for the cart endpoints. I am not 100% confident that we covered all of the cases where the stale content may happen. So we'll still like evaluating how far we can go with more eagerness. So this header we already use for cart API calls, but there's more work needed basically in this space.
Yeah. And you don't have to spend an eternity on each point, but I just want to see, just as sort of like, again, just checking in to see how things are going with respect to this slide. So you could just race through the other ones.
With the platform, this pre-render thing. So like in general for us, pre-rendering is pretty risky. Like we already talked multiple times about like people can do different like weird things on their stores, like and you have a lot of like analytics, everything that like may not account for the fact that the page is pre-rendering, and pre-render executes all of the JavaScript. So you need additional logic to detect that. We can't simply assume that every single script will be doing that. So what we are looking for is a way to do some prefetch, but with like additional things. Maybe prefetch that also triggers a preload scanner that will fetch all of the sub requests on the subsequent page. Maybe we also been talking about something that would work like a pre-render, but like until you encounter the first script. For us, it wouldn't do a lot of wouldn't make a huge difference, but for other pages that are not don't involve any like inline scripts and stuff, it may improve things further. So this is, I think there are still works going on. We are in touch with the Chromium team that they said that they will be experimenting with that. So that's definitely like if this happens, we'll want to experiment with that on our end as well. I know when it comes to like different eagerness levels, I know we have, so just to recap, we have like conservative eagerness, which is the pointer down. We have moderate, eager, and immediate. And there were also some experiments on making each one of them better and more sophisticated to detect the user intent better. I know the work on the moderate finished. It now has a little bit more sophisticated heuristics, especially on mobile. But this work, I think, finished like a few weeks ago. So we'll still waiting for the results, but we'll definitely be looking into that as well.
And just one thing on that. Different that's like with the eagerness levels, different browsers may do different things, and browsers over time may change their what they actually do in response to eagerness levels. So the semantics are vague on purpose, and this is something developers need to be okay with when going into speculation rules.
Yes, and it's really important for us because like with such a scale, like if the browser changes the strategy, we may as well DDoS ourselves. Like we may get a flood of requests, and we'll have to account for that. So like we need to be cautious, because we don't want to break things. And when it comes to encouraging other browsers, I know that I hope that like talking about the benefits that we saw encouraged other browsers. I know the Firefox team is working on their own implementation. I'm following I think it's like a Firefox bug or like an issue that they have. And Yoav has its own PR. So I think we are putting some pressure, and we are helping as much as we can. Plus this interop thing may put additional incentive, add additional incentive for the browser vendors to support even the basic like conservative eagerness just to prefetch, something that we used to do with JavaScript and link rel prefetch, and now we are able to do with this new thing in a more declarative way.
And again, Yoav, this is like your field in terms of the browsers. And any comment from your end in terms of encouraging, the browsers and the engineers, pardon me, and having them sort of like rally around the idea of being more quicker on the support with regard to particular APIs?
This is all around like, clarifying that the use case is extremely beneficial at scale. And then, doing everything that we can in order to make that happen. Because browser engineers are, in some like faster experiences are better for everyone, and no one disagrees with that. It's just a question of like, showing that this will indeed help their users, and then paving the path that will enable like, and to be clear, like even if I'm, working on a PR, it requires work from folks that are reviewing the PR to validate that, to be okay with the concept, to know that, once the code lands, it will be on them to maintain. Like I may maintain it, but I may not. And it will be, something that they will need to worry about. So there's always like, even when, someone from outside of the browser vendor is pushing a PR, there is work that's being created on the side of the browser vendor, and they need to be okay with that. And that should be motivated with clear use cases and, things like interop that, help show the, like, break down the broader perspective of the web needs to work well for developers to specific features, and to, enable browser engineers to dedicate time to push these things.
Excellent. I'm going to throw a quick little curveball right now, since, we've had what I believe a, good portion of the conversation was targeted to browsers and, everything that they do to make sure that everything works well. We are in September of 2025. Let's fast forward to September of 2026, and we now have a few AI browsers. Have you considered that conversation in terms of, now your user potentially using something like, is it Comet? That's one of them that's being sort of discussed, but specifically, I'm going to call it an AI browser because I know no other name, or at least has this been of any discussion over at Shopify?
Sure.
Oh, should I stop the stream right now? Is someone going to knock on my door?
Shopify is somewhat aware of AI,
Okay.
but I don't know that. Like, I personally have nothing to share on that front. I don't know, Mateusz.
And, and I only ask because I imagine what it was like, say, a couple years ago, and the adoption of AI, and like, we'll say, as the example, ChatGPT, people dip into that all the time. Some are claiming that, this is the end of search because, they're out there. And now some people are starting to claim that, browsers, is there going to be a death of the browser because, you know, other platforms, AI platforms, are creating their own browser as well. And, so do I see a possibility of having a significant amount of users on these new browsers that you would need to pay attention to their rollout and what they support? And that being said, how does that impact the incredible work that you've done at that level?
So I have personal opinions that I can share if that's useful. I think that there are two different models that I see emerging. One is let's have everything inside of a chat box and bring pieces of websites into that chat box. And that's what, like, things like MCP UI and things along those lines. So essentially, the website is being broken up for parts and then brought into this chat world. And then the other end of that spectrum is browsers with agents integrated into them. So you have a regular browsing experience, an agent as as a sidebar or something along those lines. And that agent can drive the website through either, LLM magic or through like MCP. And there are now standards, like a standard proposal called WebMCP that will enable a website to expose MCP tools that will enable that kind of an LLM to drive it more efficiently. So if you want to buy shoes, you have an MCP tool for that, and the LLM can just use that. It can discover that tool using the MCP protocol and use that to do whatever the user asks it to do. So in a way, it's an evolution of the term user agent. And I like that model better, but I don't know which one will win. We'll see. From a user's perspective, it also feels like a better experience. And from a web performance perspective, like, web performance still matters in this model, whereas in the MCP UI model, it's potentially less of a factor, especially for things that are like, long-term tasks. If you tell the agent, go do this, and you walk away, you don't care if this happened in 2 seconds or in 20.
Yeah. I have like three things that I wanted to mention in this area. First of all, like, going back to what Yoav said, like bringing out the parts of the websites and putting them in like chat box. I think we already have something like that. It's called agentic commerce, like as Shopify. So we are definitely, we want to stay on top of that. But like, yeah, it's not that related to our work. So that's, it's not a browser anymore, right? When it comes to like, I'm almost like the second thing is like, it reminds me a little bit about the whole AMP versus normal pages situation. I don't know if you remember that, but like everyone decided like it was the thing that you had to have like a normal page and an AMP page, right? Because there was some incentive to have a different version of your website. So I'm almost like, it gives me some flashbacks to this time where, and I'm wondering whether this time will have enough incentive to, prepare the separate thing, or will the tools adapt to what we already have, which is a website, right? And the I don't know, at this point I think it's too early. But like last part is that like I feel like the cool part about the web is that like everything, all of the standards and everything, it starts from the users, in the user land. Like people implement something, whether it's developers, whether it's like some companies and stuff, they add some capabilities, and then when it gains traction, we start thinking, okay, is this something that we should standardize? Should we have like as with the web MCP, like should we have a standard way for the AI to interact with the browser? So I still think we'll see a lot of like stuff when it comes to like AI and web. I guess we'll have to see like what sticks. But like this AMP versus standard browsers, standard websites is something that I keep thinking on when like someone tells like, oh, we need to change the whole web to accommodate for this new thing. And it's definitely something that we see like when I work with merchants, like they mention, oh, like, yeah, we have to do SEO, but now we also have to do AI SEO to make sure that we show up, in what those GPTs say. So it's definitely on the radar, but whether that changes like a web landscape significantly, from the website owner's perspective, we'll have to see.
Yeah. And, I wanted to ask simply because, there was some chatter that I'd seen around, first of all, around Comet. And I'm like, what is going on here? And I can only imagine, the others doing something along those lines. Again, ChatGPT is saying like Google search is done, like we're about to own this. And, Comet, making their claims. And it makes me wonder, again, getting back to a lot of the work that your team has been doing and trying to make sure that other browser clients are aligned. And now suddenly we have this kind of gorilla in the background saying like, hey, we're coming along for the ride too, and we're going to give everything that the user needs inside our environment. What does it mean for someone like Shopify? And that's what I was kind of like thinking of at that moment. So that being said, as we wrap up, the next 6 months, well, we're in September, whatever. So, here through the end of the year, what do you see you guys working on?
Yeah, I think we'll keep chiseling the speculation rules. And we actually sat down with Yoav a few weeks ago, and we started to dissect all of the different parts of performance here at Shopify, and we wrote this like huge map of all of the places and all of the things that like influence this whole performance that the users are getting. And we are still, I think, in a process of like figuring out, okay, what are the things that we control? What are the things that we can influence? What are the places where we can educate? So yeah, we'll see. And we'll definitely want to work across all of those areas. Yeah. Yoav?
Yeah. So that I'm like another thing that like compression dictionaries is another aspect of like less around storefronts and more around other Shopify properties that I'm working on an autofill API that essentially will improve like the API like the autofill fill rates and adaptability. And yeah, those are the broad lines of where I would love to make progress. And if I'm like, if I wrap up all these things in 6 months, I'm happy.
Awesome. That's good to hear. All right. Was that, should we consider those two as closing statements?
Sure.
Yeah.
As Yoav is like, there's always like this semi-indifference with Yoav. It's like, God, kinda, yes, I guess, sort of, right? Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe okay, yes. But
It always depends. It always
I
depends.
know exactly. You have PRs all day. I was going to say, you have with the PRs, you should start a PR agency. Just like something along those lines. But I will say this: in all likelihood, I should be at Perf now, which is going to be in just over a month, I guess, a month and maybe about 5 weeks, I think. But I'm going to say that I should have my little streaming station. And if you have any updates, something colossal or like, minuscule, by all means, come by and we could talk about it right there and then. That would be fun to have that live. So what I'm going to do, gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank you again for your time and sharing in depth what's been going on at Shopify, the spec rules, sort of like launch to 100% of your stores. It's been a very fascinating story to watch roll out. Again, I had the privilege of having you both in Toronto to speak on it in brief details. And this is obviously sort of like a part 2. And hopefully I'll have you on for a part 3 if there is one. Yoav, Mateusz, thank you again for your time. And I'll see you in a hot minute. That was fantastic. We really got into depth into what they're doing over at Shopify and their more recent rollout of the spec rules. What I'm going to do in the show notes, I'm going to be sharing the video to the original talk that Mateusz gave in Toronto. It was late May. And so you have, some sort of like idea of what was being discussed at that time, and you can sort of create the parallels to what they've done more recently. So that's going to be awesome. I'm actually also going to provide a link to Yoav's talk because he was there as well, and he touched on some of the details that he mentioned today in a more lengthy manner in that talk in Toronto. So I'll be sure to share that link as well. The other thing I'm going to mention is do not forget that SPDY Stream 10 with Jakob Gross is up and ready. And I'll just, whatever, you'll be able to see that. As usual, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm going to have this talk ready or this stream ready to rewatch on Wednesday of next week, if not Thursday. Beyond that, as usual, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you next week. And I'm going to announce next week's speaker tomorrow formally, but I'll tell you right now, I'm going to have Scott Gell, actually, who's over at Squarespace right now. And I've been trying to get him on for a little while. Schedules kind of don't align always, but we were able to set that up. So next Wednesday, I'm going to have Scott Gell at 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. I have to apologize to Europeans out there. That's going to be, I think, 8 p.m. Sorry about that. But I like to accommodate all schedules. That's it. All right, folks, thank you very much. Have yourself a good rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.